I want to welcome everybody to NixTrainz Meetup this evening. Thank you so much for coming. Hope you'll come back many times and tell your friends to please join us. If you have not done so, if you could go to newtraxmodeling.com, our website, newtraxmodeling.com, and register, then you'll automatically get emails about our shows and about our train show that's coming up each time we have one. And we have these twice a week, Wednesday and Saturday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern time. I want to talk a little bit about our train show. It's going to be November the 21st at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We've got over 30 vendors, both manufacturers and publications that are going to be in the show. There's a list of them that you're seeing. And we think that it's really going to be a neat show this time. There'll be plenty of time for questions and answers at the end of it. And you can deal with the individual companies through the chat function or by direct email during their presentation at the show. So we hope you'll put it on your calendar. Hope you'll register at our website, newtraxmodeling.com, and hope you'll attend. Now I'd like to introduce Paul Vaughn, Precision Vintage Classics Company. Paul's the owner. And Paul is in our train show. And Paul, I appreciate you being here this night and talking a little bit about your company.
You're welcome. I'm Paul Vaughn. The original PVC, or Precision Vintage Classics, was started by three of us. That was 1982 to about 1985. We imported one brass #2 goose from Rio Grande Southern from Japan, but we never did anything else, and the company folded about 1985. In 1994, I started up the second version, Precision Vintage Classics LLC, and it's strictly me. So we started out making resin kits and styrene kits. I bought Berlin Locomotive Works SN3 line in 2009. I bought the Tamalco Locomotive Parts line in 2014. And now we have our own injected car kits. We have resin car kits. And right now we're working on a power truck and 3D printed products for hopefully it's HOS and ON30. So that's one of the things that we're doing now. The power trucks should be in production by the end of the month, but on the train show, I'm going to highlight our uncoupler, under the track uncoupler for KD style couplers, and I'll be highlighting the standard gauge O and standard gauge S coupled together and delaying uncoupling even without modification to either coupler. And that's one of the things that I think is important. The other thing is we have a product that will identify where the uncoupler is once you ballast your track, because you won't be able to see it from the top until you have a marker of some type. And the marker I've come up with is a blue LED and very bright, so you know exactly where the center of the uncoupler is. So Jim, I want to see everybody go to the train show on the 21st. I will be a participant, and Jim, it's now back to you.
Well, Paul, thank you so very much. I appreciate it. And TC has done such a great job on our website. I mean, we started from nothing, and he's still working on it, but it's come an awful long way in a very short period of time. So I do hope that you'll go, and I hope you'll take the time to register so that you'll be able to find out about our future events. Also, TC has agreed, and we're going to start this probably in December. And once a month, TD is going to take about 15, 20 minutes at the first of one of our shows and talk about electronics and future electronics that is going to impact us as model railroaders. There's an awful lot of things coming on the market and being developed right now. And I think this will be really interesting for all of us to have TC tell us about what is out there that we can use and the new things that are being developed right now and researched. So TC, I thank you so much for agreeing to do this, and I'm looking forward to the first one.
Well, you're welcome. Excuse me while I try to cough my lungs up.
The next My Bill is going to be December the 12th. And we hope that you'll bring a model to share with us and talk to us about so that we can see what kinds of things you're building and what issues you're having with your modeling. It'll help us all. So I hope to put that on your calendar. Chris Coates is going to be the moderator for those. And if you'll contact Chris, and Dylan, if you can put his email up on the chat function, please, and tell him that you'd like to be in his December the 12th program, I would appreciate it, because we've had an awful lot of people sign up for the past programs, and we've had to tell some people that we just didn't have time for them. So if you're interested in it at all, if you could send Chris an email, tell him that you'd like to be a part of that show on December the 12th, he'd appreciate it, and we all would. Our featured modeler tonight is Nick Santos. Nick is the owner of NixTrainz, NixTrainz. He's also going to be in our November the 21st train show, and he has an electronic items that he wants to talk to you about and show to you. So Nick, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. It's good to be with all you people tonight. Wasn't quite sure which way I wanted to go tonight. I've got a locomotive here on my other computer that I brought up, and it was an Atlas at one time with a QSI. Actually, it was pre-QSI. It was a old dual mode decoder, and it was fine running engine, and I like Atlas, and I wanted to put ditch lights on it, and that was kind of the beginning of NixTrainz. Let's take a look at the presentation, and then I'll jabber a little bit more about NixTrainz itself. We'll see if I'm lucky and we can do this here.
Come on, we trust you, Nick. You know you can do it.
You got a picture of a locomotive on your screens?
Yep, we do.
Yep.
Okay. This is the locomotive that we'll start with. New England Central was a railroad that started in the top of Vermont, and it goes down through to the bottom of Vermont. It ended up on the Connecticut shore. It was Canadian National, and Canadian National may well buy back into it again. We want to do some passenger service up this way. It was an important side railroad in terms of the Vermont Railway that I model, and it's a nice older locomotive. So let's take a look now at what I did to bring it back up. The workbench is fairly clean today. First off, we're going to remove the dynamic brake hatch. You kind of grab it toward the rear side and wiggle it back and forth and pull it apart. Then you go and find a screwdriver, and right here you'll find a screw that comes out from the pocket, and then another pocket on the other side, and that takes care of getting the screws out. I like to put a couple of neodymium magnets on the screwdriver to help. if you pop the 4 handrails off the cab, you can pull it straight up and then take it and put aside. Probably the best point to make here is that if you've got anybody with sensitive ears in the room, you send them out to work in the garden, or maybe just leave the room for a little bit until you can get this shell off. The clips here, after you realize what's happening, make it a little bit easier, but the air can still get kind of blue when you're taking that shell off. You pinch in the sides, and you can see where that's going to take care of releasing those tabs. I found that probably the best way to fix the situation is a pair of Xeron flush cutters. It isn't very long before you can get that to where the tabs are where they're supposed to be and get circular filed. And you can take this off by just pulling the screws out. And then when you put the screws back in, it will hold the shell onto the frame. Incandescent bulbs are the next thing to go. They've done nothing but cause me trouble in terms of finishing off the locomotive, getting an incandescent bulb to light up once and maybe for the next 10 minutes, and then have to go back in and fix things. I'm really a fan of LEDs, so they'll leave with the old dual mode decoder that's in this locomotive. Two Phillips screws will take and release the weights. The weights on most of the locomotives I've seen are generally held in by screws, either from the top or the bottom. They all have their different way of hiding the screws. It's not a big deal to get them out. You're also going to show the wires that come up from the trucks if you're lucky. We'll show you an Athearn blue box that does it a little bit differently, and I'll rewire the trucks into the decoder after that. After the weights are off, then the next thing that's going to happen is to mill the weights a little bit. I happen to have a drill with a Dremel with a composite wheel and a vise, and the Dremel worked really well in terms of just routing out a groove to put the wires in. You can see the groove there along the sides of the weight, and the truck wires will just fit into there nicely. The cleaner the installation and the easier it goes in, the less chafing you have a chance of, the better chance you have of having a locomotive work for a while longer. I found a hacksaw is a good way to take off a large chunk of the locomotive weight. This particular piece got in the way of getting the decoder to set down in nicely. It will leave a pretty rough surface, so the next thing I'll probably have to do is take a file and dress it off so that I don't cut myself later on or get slivers in my fingers. Now we're at the part of the decoder removal. You can cut wires off. I found that a lot of times it's just as easy, if not easier, to desolder the wires and get the 4 track wires, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the 2 motor wires, and leave the solder right on them. If they're all tinned and ready to go and the right length, then it's just that much less work that you have to do to continue the installation. A nice clean solder, nice clean soldering iron is a big help. And the next step would be to just take a pair of flush cutters and cut the tops of those clips off. I get a number of questions from people and comments from people that have the clip style decoder holders. And some people say, well, I don't want to use tape, and other people say I don't want to use glue. So that's good. Tell the no glue people to use tape and the no tape people to use glue. I found the best way to work with this for myself is to just cut those 2 tabs off and remove the decoder. I'll come back in with the flush cutters again in a moment, and just make that that surface just flat along there. And between, if you took a line from the top of that one to the top of that one, the distance here is enough so that you can fit the motor wires in there again also. I'll also dress the top of the decoder holder with a file just to smooth it out and give it a place to put some I like Walther's glue. Silicone gasket sealer is good. Rubber cement is good. Or if you want to go from over the top of the motor, or from the bottom of the motor over the top of the decoder, whatever you're going to use, and down the other side, that'll hold it equally as well. The combination of the 4 wires that you're going to solder to it and a little bit of stability here on the motor so that decoder doesn't go moving around very much, and you get the motor wires attached to it, and you don't really need you don't really need an awful lot of structural or adhesive holding power right there. As a matter of fact, if anything happens to your decoder or something goes wrong or you want to reposition your decoder, it's kind of nice to have it have an adhesive that will break away there. The silicone gasket sealer, and I'm really a big believer in using an awful lot of Walther's glue. We'll see that come into the picture a couple more times, I'm sure. Now you're going to want to determine where the decoder buddy's going to sit, and you can glue it on now or not. It's not a bad idea sometime along in here to figure out which motor wires are at least the length of the motor wires. One thing I found about the Chinese people who put these in and the decoder manufacturers themselves are all a little bit different, and in most circumstances, it's a 50% guess. And for me, it's 75% chance that I'll get it wrong and have to change the motor wires before I end up. It's always going in the wrong direction after I solder them in. So what I'll do is I'll take a nice long one and I'll bend it over. And you want to be careful about that. You don't want to get a motor wire anywhere near where you've got track power, but or so that motor wire won't jump off on you. But that's one of the last things I'll solder on, and not until I'm sure with the decoder in my decoder buddy or in the decoder which direction the locomotive is going to go when I have the 2 wires connected and the decoder in. So if you're sure of the position, glue it on the pads now. And the next thing will be to attach the 4 track wires. In an installation like this, if it's not the next version Atlas, these 4 holes were designed to go into replace the QSI decoders in the mid series of Atlas locomotives. In this one, they make just kind of a nice place to route the wires away from the I can't say that word. Those rotating brass weights.
The flywheels.
Flywheels, thank you. Let's see, let's get caught up with this and it'll catch up with me. There we go. One of the people who also work with us in the shows is JT Burke, and I'm very partial to his speakers. The Scale Sound speakers are absolutely superb. What I like a lot is the sound. I was sitting here in the cellar one night, and I turned I turned on the locomotive, and I actually almost looked around to figure out who and try to figure out who was in the driveway with a heavy truck. It was had that much bass. They're really good speakers. Another trick, if you haven't done, this is essentially a equivalent. I'm pretty sure he doesn't use cell phone speakers. I know he went through a stage where he had trouble getting speakers. He ran out of the old speakers. The new ones are equally as good, but they're all magnetic. So if you go in with a nice soldering iron, it'll pick up the speaker, and you won't be able to get rid of it. So when I've got his speaker, I've got something to hold it down, and that's going to allow me to pull my soldering iron away when I'm finished soldering. I like goo again for mounting JT speakers. You can see I'm using some goo on it here. It's going to mount to this weight here shortly. Again, if anything happens to the speaker, if anything happens to the locomotive, and I want to move it to another locomotive or whatnot, the goo will hold it. It'll insulate it from vibration. But it's also you can get into it and detach it from the locomotive again. So it's a good all around adhesive. Excuse me. This is the installed decoder buddy, or decoder, whichever. One nice thing about the decoder buddy, people come after me and say, well, gee whiz, we've got the PNP type style decoders. Why spend the extra money on the PNPs? Well, the 21 pin decoders fit right on here, and this is another 1/4 of an inch shorter than the PNPs. So look at all the room you have here to put a speaker. And there's after you get the decoder on there and get the small lighting connector board on there, there's still enough room in that cavity for a stay alive. This happens to be a version 5, so you can see that the transistors are all in there and ready to power a dozen lighting functions. This is a view from the other side, not a big deal, just to see how it fits. And you can see I did use tape on that one. This happens to have a ES or lock sound, ESU lock sound decoder in it. Just what I happen to have at the moment. What I did on this board is here you can get 12 lighting functions out, and with the ESU, the new version 5 ESU decoders, you have 12 lighting functions, and two of these pads are for stay alives, and then the other 3, this one and this one, is for function 11 and 12 for the for ground lights or step lights or any sort of lighting that would happen to stay with the frame part of the locomotive. If you have an 8 output decoder to bridge a couple of these and drop them down onto the motherboard, it isn't a big deal. That's pretty much it for that installation. Let's see. Now the trick is to stop this. Stop. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because I think I'm going to have to bring up another presentation. Let me ask you people. I've got a couple videos tonight. I got surprised today, and one of the videos isn't a video anymore. It was a PowerPoint presentation. Bill Gates decided to change formats on me today. So I've got another one that's a little bit more generic that if you want, I can, if you haven't done a lot of installations, I can show it. It's more generic, gives you a little bit of the theory and thoughts behind putting decoders into locomotives. If you'd like that one, I'll show that one. Otherwise, we can go into another part of the top end of the shell and wiring LEDs up. What's your pleasure?
Oh, I'd like to see how some of the lighting is wired up.
Okay.
But that's just me.
That's okay. We'll give it. Cross your fingers. Here we go.
I'm assuming, Nick, I'm assuming that most of the people here are somewhat familiar with DCC. I may be wrong about that.
Very good.
And if I am, please speak up because, it's possible, we've got time, Nick, to show both of these if you'd like to see the first one too. We just need to know what your interest is here.
I personally would like to see initial installation on something that does not have DCC already in it.
Okay. Then let's continue with this one, and we can show you a couple. We've got the basic part down.
I think we've got time, Nick. You don't have to worry too much about that. So
yeah, plenty of time.
We've got more than enough time, Nick. You do what you feel works best, and I think we'll be in good shape.
Okay. Well, you know what?
Movies if you want.
Let's try this. Let's try this one here. If for nothing else, I can zip through this one pretty quickly. This one is a little bit basic. It's not a big deal. Let's see if she'll come up. Do you have something that says DCC installations in front of you?
Yes, we do.
Very good. Okay.
It says it's slide 1 though.
Yeah.
It's a picture.
There we go.
Okay, good.
We can zoom through this part pretty easily. DCC Basics, the track carries both power and the signal in DCC. The decoder changes the power. which is not really AC and it's not really DC. It's kind of in between, but it changes it to usable power. And the decoder also gets a control signal and the control functions through the track into the decoder. Enough of that. There's quite a little bit to that theory. I'm not going to go deeply into it. The three types of functions that we're mainly interested in a DCC decoder are motor, sound, and lights or miscellaneous. You might actually, I've seen an awful lot of people that are probably interested in putting these into steam engines. So that would be a miscellaneous, or if you're in Europe, the Europeans like to open and shut doors on commuter rail cars. Let's think about the motor functions for a second. The motors are straight DC. If you're having trouble with the decoder, you can take a 9-volt battery and just touch the positive and negative side to the two motors, two sides of the motors, and make the motor go back and forth by switching the wires. And that's a nice way to find out whether it's your decoder that isn't making letting the motor work, or the motor has an issue. So you've got two wires connected to the motor. One can be plus, and that same one can be minus. And when you change the polarity, it goes in the other direction. The wires that come from the motor have a 50% chance of being color-coded the same way from any particular manufacturer. I think that's the second time I've said that tonight. Depends upon how that little Chinese lady reads the word black and red, whether she's good in English or not. The wire, I'm going to get thrown out if I'm not careful. The wires that come from the motor might be the same color also. Probably shouldn't trust the wires for direction. Motor isolation is really critical. I was just working with I think it was a Proto or an old Roco, and some of those motors it's pretty well hidden in terms of whether they're isolated from the frame, or the frame brings the track power to the motor. If it is DC that you're starting with, so you want to be very careful of that part. To isolate the motor means to not have the motor in any way meeting track power, because if track power goes through the motor and up into your decoder, the magic white smoke will jump right out of that decoder. Sound is another part of what the DCC decoders do. Speakers translate electricity to sound. They make a diaphragm move back and forth, and that causes the air to move, and you can hear that. Speakers are electrically polar. It's important to know the polarity of speakers when hooking them in either series or parallel. When you're putting speakers into a locomotive, it doesn't make any difference which leads you take into the decoder. You get two leads coming out of the decoder, and then you go either series or parallel afterwards, and that depends upon the decoder you're using. I've just recently thrown some ideas up on the website of how to wire series and parallel. There was a video that came out that made me wonder, and I talked to the guy, and we both decided that we'd put some pictures up. Okay. Each speaker is usually going to get a wire apiece, just like a motor. Lights, bulbs, or lamps are not polar, but they're not polar also because they get hot. And what I found in terms of the 12 volts that comes out of DCC is that the resistor that you're using to make the 12 volts come down to either 1.5 volts for some bulbs or 3 volts for other bulbs, and some bulbs are 12 volts. And but if you're going down to 3 volts or 1.5 volts, the resistor gets really hot. And I've heard stories, and I hadn't really realized what that was all about. A resistor inside my locomotive melted the whole top of the shell, unquote. Poor guy. But what he used is a small resistor, like a 1/4 watt resistor, and he had to stop all that electricity going in that little tiny resistor, and it heated up. It's just like a wire or an element in your electric stove. So I think the case, and Joe Fugate and I kind of put shoulders together on Model Railroad Hobbyist and said, hey, listen, come on up into the 21st century and use LEDs if you can. My only hedge on that is if you're going to use 12 volts and you're going to use bulbs, be really careful. They might do great in a brass locomotive that'll dissipate the heat, or if you use a large, maybe a 1/2 watt 180 ohm resistor or whatever resistor you need to cut the voltage down. Don't be afraid of a big resistor. If you're caught for space, they make LEDs. I'll show you some in a couple minutes that come in both LED colors and pretty good representations of incandescent colors. Both need a certain amount of current to light. The bulbs need a lot of current, and the LEDs need very little current. Both LEDs and bulbs will fail if you add too much current. And you're responsible for the well-being of either your bulbs or your resistors. The manufacturers or I will, we'll shake our heads and put our heads down and say, oh, we're sorry, but you're still responsible for making the right resistance calls. It's not a big deal. The miscellaneous functions in the decoder are 2-wire stay alives, and they store or keep alives. I can say it here. I got in trouble for writing keep alives because TCS wanted to keep their copyright, and I understand that together. There's current keepers out, and ESU's a little bit different. They use power packs, which has a 3rd wire. So most manufacturers are able to deal with 2-wire stay alive, so a positive wire and a negative wire that gets put into the circuit and gives you DC voltage back out to get you across a frog or some dirty track or whatever. There are some issues with ESU decoders, for sure. They have a 3-wire stay alive or keep power pack, and what they do is they that 3rd wire flips a switch so that it's either on or off. And in terms of programming the sound functions in the ESU decoders, you can scramble a decoder, and it really became quite an issue for a while. So I guess to leave it at, if you're going to use an ESU decoder, think seriously about either using their power pack or putting a switch on that third leg so that you can turn it off, or be prepared to take the shell off and unsolder the wire and reprogram your decoder. Smoke generators and servos are another part of the miscellaneous functions in the in the decoders. There are two major types of outputs in decoders. And why I developed the Decoder Buddy was because in most decoders, the NMRA, I believe, either specified or one of the manufacturers specified, and everybody else fell along, and the NMRA followed with a specification that your two headlights and two auxiliary functions, the first two auxiliary functions give you 12 volts. The rest may well give you 5 volts. And so what I did with the Decoder Buddy is I figured out after 55 years of letting it ride. When I was in high school, I built a TAT 4 throttle or TAT 3 throttle that came out of model railroader, and it didn't work. So I said, you know, that's transistor. Heck with it. I won't think about transistors for a while. And 55 years later, I needed a switch and figured out how a transistor worked. So I designed them. I designed them into the Decoder Buddy circuit. So what you have on that is any outputs that you have, either 8 outputs on the 8 output one, or 12 outputs on the 12 output one, are all at 12 volts, and they've all been reduced to I think it's 20 milliamps with a 2.2K resistor. Output voltages may be available on other decoders for switching. I know Soundtrax had a switch or an alternate place you could solder to for 12 volts, or a bridge or something that you could bring 12 volts to more of the outputs. If you do have 12 volts, you want to use either and let's think about that for a second. 2.2K resistor is going to allow less current than a 1K resistor is going to allow less current than a 820 ohm resistor. And I've had people even ask me for 750 ohm resistors to drive their LEDs. The 2.2K is going to last a long time, but if you're not worried about lasting a long time, what's a long time? I don't know, whether it's half again as long, twice as long, but it's going to last longer. What the guy with the 750 ohm resistor says is, well, I don't care how long it lasts. I just want to have it as bright as possible so I can burn a hole in the wall if the locomotive goes off the track. So it's your prerogative to if you're doing a rebuild or whatever, and it's your option to think about whether you want really bright lights or really long lasting lights. And the brightness, you can see the difference. The length of time they last, I'm not sure that any of us would see the full length of an LED light from the amount of time that we spend running our locomotives. On that first video, I kind of alluded to what was happening basically in a decoder installation. You got 2 tracks, and each track has a wire or a set of wheels and a wire coming up from it in general in locomotives. Now that isn't true all the way across the board. If it isn't, then it's advisable to at least consider bringing as many wires up from as many trucks as you can in terms of going across the frog and in terms of dirty track and all that. So I've depicted 4 wires here and then 2 wires that go into a motor. And that's an awful lot of a decoder install. If you've got the basics there and a decoder, you've got 90% of the thought process happened. So in here, you can see the two track wires on each side coming up and the two motor wires. You can see the two track wires here and the two track wires here and the two motor wires here. And if you're going to do sound, then you've got a couple wires coming up from the speaker. Here you've got, notice in this one, both sides are black. In this side, in this locomotive, they've got a black wire on one side and a red wire on the other. And it just, you know, that's nice. It'll help you keep them a little bit more separated. And they've got a red and a black wire on the motor as well. These happen to be the three current generations of Atlas locomotives. I got into Atlas. I like Atlas. I think they're very reliable, very smooth motors, and have built a really good locomotive for a long time. I didn't like their QSI decoders, and I'm not happy with the JST connectors, even in the new locomotives. The JST connectors and their motherboards do not allow me to add lights the way I would like to add lights to a locomotive. These are a couple, this is a before and after Proto. I was lucky, those two screws lined up nicely and turned up again here. This had a motor that was, if I remember correctly, I think this one was isolated, but don't hold me to that. So all I had to do is take the track wires up through and solder them on, and off we went. And the motor wires. This is a Proto 1000 RSD2. That's a pretty tight locomotive to be throwing a decoder in. He had a really small speaker. He's going to take care of his track and take care of his frogs. So he decided that he didn't need a stay alive in there. And there's plenty of room in that little locomotive for a decoder. This is an Athearn yellow box. It was a ready to run, and it's the same old Athearn blue box style locomotive. You have electricity coming up from this truck up through this metal part, which goes all the way across and back down into that metal part on the other side, and that's feeding into this this brush, which is hidden in here. And on the other side, the electricity comes up from the wheels through the truck and and where it pivots, the electricity comes over into the frame. And when it gets into the frame, then on the bottom, it has a metal copper clip with two tabs that push down onto the frame right there and make a connection. So that's a well hidden isolation feature that you know you're gonna have to deal with to put a decoder in there safely. What I've done is there's when you pull this off, there's a spring here, and beneath it is the carbon brush, and you can see where it rubs on the comminutor there. That spring has I don't know, it's I think they should have used that instead of the F-35s. It's so stealthy. When that jumps out of there, it just gone, never find it again. What I've done is I just cut that off and file it a little bit. And then what I'll do is I'll put a piece of tape in here. So just in case it decides to get down that way. And in the old days, what I've done is I've drilled I think it's a number 50 drill. And a 256 tap and put a 256 screw in here. This is Zymac, which is very tough to solder to. And if you put a nice steel screw in there, then you can solder to that very easily. I put that out on the internet, and I was a little bit naive. I got grief for that immediately. And what they were saying was, why weren't you going down and soldering leads onto the wheels? So after I got the whole thing put together, I had to take it apart again, and just to show them it wasn't that I was lazy. It was just that I didn't know about soldering leads to those wheels. For better, and it did make sense for much better contact. These two metal pieces are connected to the sides of the trucks that with rivets, and that was good for me. But on the other side, I had to find a place to get 2 more wires. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4 wires, I had 5 wires. And since that one was on there, what the heck? Well, I decided to keep it. I got 2 pieces. I like the Miniatronics really flexible wire. And I got 2 pieces of that soldered to those copper keys, of which you saw one a minute ago. So this is all ready to go back together again, essentially. This is a brand new Genesis. You can see it's the same game, though. You got 2 wires coming up from the truck here, 2 wires coming up from the truck here. It's a little bit tougher to see. You got a couple. Oh, this is a before picture. This is with a soundtracks, a Tsunami 2 decoder in there. So I guess maybe the next picture I've gone after it and started to tear it apart. There are the 2 wires. There are the 2 wires. And the motor wires are in here. And I've also, this one came through, let's see, that's 432. So this one came through with LED lights. And these are all the LED wires that were coming down through from their lighting system. You can see here, one of the things that I thought about was when I soldered, or when I'm soldering around here, and this is too close and I'm not paying close enough attention, then I'm putting on a new handrail, or I have a big ding or a hole in the side of my locomotive where I, went with the soldering iron. So one of the things I designed into the decoder buddy, we'll show you later, I guess, is that there's a board here, and you can completely separate out the shell from what you're doing with the locomotive. Same thing would be if you needed to do some maintenance on the motor or pull the motor. That shell doesn't even have to be in the same room. Alec Herman showed me this picture, and when I saw it, it caught my eye because I saw the red wire and the black wire coming up through to the 2 terminals on the Decoder Buddy motherboard, and then I saw this white wire, and I had to ask him where it was going. What you do is, with the white wire on this, you can put it into either terminal 10 or terminal 1, which is aux 10, to make their power pack work. Alternatively, if you wanted to, you could tack it onto aux 9 here, and you could get all 12 lighting outputs plus turn on and off your power pack. Let's think about a general decoder block diagram next. Here you got your 2 track inputs, or 4-track inputs, you got your 2 motor outputs, you got your speaker outputs, and then you got your blue wire, which doesn't show up very well here, but that's your blue wire, and then you have different colored wires coming out of the out of the decoder. What a decoder does is it takes positive voltage from the decoder, goes out through the LED, and then comes back in. And I've got those arrows the wrong way, really, because the power comes back in through the decoder on most decoders, through the resistors, and then in the decoder is where the switch is, and it's a switch to ground, which turns on and off your function. I think that soldering is generally the best conventional method of connecting things in electronically connecting parts in a locomotive. Gold to gold connectors are also very reliable. Neatness is very important. The neater you can keep an installation, the less chance you got of fouling a flywheel with a wire, or if you've got an abrasion point of shorting a wire and burning a decoder. Excess wire should be avoided, which is why I like the Decoder Buddy. The mass of wires from what I call a dangling wire decoder, even if they're cut off, you've got the end of those wires that have to be taken care of. It just gets rid of all that mass of excess wire. I like Kapton tape as an adhesive, and the custom or the current wisdom of black tape is that if you get a cheap black electrical tape, then the adhesive is probably going to migrate on you. I use 3M electrical tape, and I didn't find that happening a lot. I bought a roll of Kapton tape, and it's probably going to last me the rest of my life, and I couldn't tell you where my 3M tape is anymore. The Kapton tape is very well set for warm or hot environments, actually, and it does get warm inside a locomotive once the motor's been running for a while, but I don't think it's I'm sure it's well below anything that the Kapton will be liable for. Heat shrink is very good for insulation. Automotive silicon RTV adhesives and sealants are used in cars, and around hot oil and hot water, boiling water, warmer than boiling water. So RTV would be a good adhesive. CA is okay depending upon what you're doing inside a locomotive. I like glue and rubber cement. Actually, all those are very good insulators. One thing we found about heat shrink tubing is CA will adhere to heat shrink tubing, and George Bogatuk made a good point in that he said don't shrink the heat shrink, but use it as a wire router. It adheres nicely to the shell with the CA, and it just you can have a nice loose place to thread your LED wires through. So what's the hardest step? Removing the locomotive shell. After you've got that done, you can let people back into the house again. Get the assembly sheet if you need it. Usually involves removing the couplers on a diesel. Toothpicks, barbecue skewers are very helpful. Popsicle sticks are handy, but leave the 3-pound hammer out in the garage. Cutting and unsoldering. Best place to start is to unsolder wires, I think. That keeps them at their full length, and then they're handy. They're all tinned and ready to go. Connectors, I'll cut those right off. A JST connector, it's too bad they have to use those to begin with. Plastic clips on decoders. I haven't got a decoder around here, but you know the fingers that come out and the wires go in, and you got a plastic clip on there. That's a place where trouble can start. If you're inside the shell of a locomotive and you got plastic clips on there, if I got plastic clips on there, I'm gonna solder where the plastic clips are. Now you're at the reassembly spot. What I do is lightly solder the motor wires to the decoder. Leave them long. You probably have to change them once if you have my luck. And I like to enter from the bottom of the decoder. Let's see if I've got one. I've done that too. Yeah. This one isn't soldered, but you can see they go in up through the bottom, and the rest of them go. The rest of the wires go in from the top or from elsewhere. It's just a little bit neater in terms of assembling. Got one more over here. Put up for you guys to take a peek at. I don't know whether that's going to show very well or not, but you can see the motor.
Yeah, you'd
wires.
probably have to drop the screen share so we could see it better.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to do that right now. Thank you. Solder the track wires up. Solder the speaker wires up to the decoder. Attach any stay alives or the stay alives if you want, and then test the installation. The lighting. Let's not think about bulbs anymore. LEDs can be used at any voltage. They've got a long life, no heat, realistic color, and many sizes. And you can size resistors to have them last for as long as you want. They're all made in China. I like them pre-wired if I can get them that way. They're color coded usually when you get them wired. They generally need a resistor. Calculation of the resistance is easy. Brightness best variable with the decoder, but you can rough in the brightness with a resistor a lot too. If you've got say a step light or a ground light, you can instead of using a 750 ohm resistor or 2.2K, you can go out to 10K or even 20K resistor and make an estimate of or get it into a region so that the decoder won't have to use the PWM as much. That's a resistance box I made up for bulbs. When I was using bulbs, it's come in pretty handy. Just, you know, what am I going to use for what am I going to use for resistor? I run up to 1.6K. And I used those a couple times for LEDs and got an idea, and then it's gone back onto the shelf again. I don't use it very much anymore. I can leave this here for a minute. You've probably all seen the V equals IR equation, or volts equal amps times ohms to calculate the number of milliamps. In general, 12 volts. Most LEDs will use about 10 to 20 milliamps, which is 0.020 amps, just a rough one. So 0.02 goes into 12 volts. 600 times, so you need a 600 ohm resistor. So when you're coming up to 1K, you're being a little bit conservative. 2.2K, you probably won't see an awful lot of difference in the brightness, but they should last longer. A lot of manufacturers use 1Ks. NCE started as long as I can remember ago. Loc Sound uses 2.2Ks. When I made the Decoder Buddies, now I've got them in 1 and 2.2Ks, and I'll do custom resistors in other sizes just to keep the general masses happy. We've discussed the rest of that. I don't think I need to go into that any farther. LEDs are polar. Be really careful. My LEDs aren't working. My lights aren't working well. Make sure that the red lead is going to the positive side, or U plus, or the blue, the place where the blue wire goes. And you'll probably be in good shape. One thing I've found is that too many LEDs in either series or parallel won't light up. You just don't have enough current through all of them to make them light. I think two of the of anything bigger than 0402s, or maybe three. Three I'd start to test and make sure that it was going to work. 3 LEDs in a row in either series or parallel. And with the 0201s, I've gotten 4 to work easily. 5 is starting to be iffy. You want to be a little bit careful about how many you've got going. What I do with LEDs is you can see this is in series. You're going in on the red, back out on the black, in on the red, and back out on the black and into the decoder. This is this red one is going into U plus, or the blue side, and it's connected to an LED that I like the 0603s because each one of those is fitting right into a headlight opening, and it'll be the same thing for the ditch lights. I've put LEDs, I think 5730s on these 2 number boards, and then taken the whole thing and just covered it with, some people say black electrical liquid adhesive or liquid insulation works well. I used black acrylic paint or black writer's paint, just something to stop that backlight from coming up through. Neatness counts. This was an Locomotive that we saw earlier, getting its lights put in. You got you just barely see where the ditch lights are coming in from, and the cab light and the headlights are coming in through here. So you got quite a few wires coming in this way. And to put that through a piece of heat shrink, or just a piece of wire, just is going to keep that, even those, a little bit more, a little bit neater. The next thing is I like to put all the red wires, connect all the red wires on, and then what I can do is I can take a voltmeter and I can test. I can hitch or a battery. I can hitch the battery to this red side. The red, these little terminals are all connected, and they're connected side to side too. So it's just it isn't a grounding. It isn't a grounding bar. It's essentially the same as a car, except the car is a negative ground and this is a positive common. And if you take the other side of a battery and touch each of these wires, you can tell which light it's going to light up, and that's very handy because at that point you can determine which aux function or aux output you're gonna tie to, so you know exactly where the lights are gonna go. That's what that one looked like just before it finished up. And that's the decoder buddies that I make. So let's see if we can make that go away. And what do you think, Dylan? Think if I'm lucky, I can show you what my layout looks like?
I think you can.
Double click on it and see if it'll come up. Somebody playing music for you? You see a locomotive there?
Trying to figure out who it is.
The music?
Yeah.
Tuba Skinny.
Oh, that's on your end.
Yeah, they're lighting it up for you.
Yeah, it didn't even come up on the video. Didn't come up on the screen.
I'm sorry. The video didn't come up?
No, it didn't.
Okay. Then I know what I got to do, don't I? I got to kill it.
Yeah, the music sounds like it's coming from a speaker.
Yeah, that was done today. My apologies. I'm gonna I killed screen share and I got to do screen share again, right? And I've got to choose that. I've got to bring it up. Why don't I see it?
I don't know.
Huh. That worked before.
Yeah, it's worked twice already.
Let's see. Let's kill that one more time. We'll bring it up.
Yeah, it's still not showing up in the screen share.
And then, you know what? I'm not seeing it on the screen share is what the problem is.
Oh, hold on. Something's coming up now. Yeah, it's just giving us the thumbnails now.
So you're getting thumbnails.
Yep.
That's going to be wicked because I had that working earlier.
Shouldn't there be one more prompt after you select that? One more prompt that says to share screen after you've done the selection?
You know what? I'm going to stop share. Bring this up. Stop. Hit screen share.
Yep.
Then now I got two choices. It's going to be the wrong one.
Nope, we got a video.
Haha. Lucked out. So what I did today. This
I
is
hate not to cut you off, but now the video's all stuttery. You might want to check the box off for optimize for video, and that should fix it.
where do I find that?
You're gonna have to get out of the screen share again.
Stop share.
Yep. And then when you press screen share, at the bottom bottom left corner, there's one that says share computer sound and optimize screen share for video clip. So you got to tick off the optimize screen share for video clip, and then you should be good to go.
So optimize screen sharing for video clip is off.
You want to tick that box. You want to click
Yes.
that box.
And
That should do
share
it.
computer sound.
I think it does it automatically with the video.
Okay.
And then share it, and you should be good to go.
Cross your fingers. Do you have a picture?
Yep, we see it.
Now you hear it?
Yep.
Okay. Again, I was fighting with stuff today. My apologies. You see lights and the layout, and you get some different music, not the J.C. Burke speakers. Not the
I think we'll
J.C.
make
Burke
do.
speakers. This is Burlington Yard, and it was the center. It was the center of the layout. That's what I saw a lot, and what I wanted, where I wanted to build the what I wanted to build the layout around. I'd go down in, and sometimes I could get into wherever I wanted to, and sometimes the security police would throw me out on my ear. So I was a pilot, and I said, well, I'll fix that. So I flew over the top of the yard and took a bunch of pictures. We were running a flight school, and I taught 2 of the 3 siblings of Vermont Railway. Jay Wolfson came up from New Jersey and started Vermont Railway and had 3 kids, and 2 of them are ultimately involved with the railroad. Just picked this one up. I taught one how to fly and got one started, and the guy that I got started was real nuts and bolts guy of the railroad. He made the whole thing work. And he saw that yard and he said, boy, Nick, that looks just like the yard I built when I was a kid. So I took that as a high compliment. That crossing was run completely by Arduino. This is the head of the Burlington Yard. You can see that there's a lot to go still. It's all scratch built. Tony Custer took a picture of that from an angle that you won't see today. On the right was a building, was a depot in Leicester, Vermont, and it grew and grew and grew and grew and to be a cattle feed distributor. We have marble up here. That marble place on the left is freelance. One thing you'll see in Vermont Railway a lot in the pictures of Vermont Railway is a couple 3-4 engines pulling a whole bunch of tank cars, and they're all full of lime slurry. So that's a pretty prototypical train for this part of the world. You can see the feed dealer again from a little bit different angle. These are 2 Walthers propane tanks, and I took and built the platform myself. That's Walther's fence. I thought that was very good fence. So I put in the propane dealer. So that from about where that train is coming across the crossing, up to the end of this propane is really a signature scene, or a second or third signature scene in the railroad. All I can do is do the loop at the moment, and I can't get that train off the upper deck because over on the other side there's a bridge, and I haven't finished the bridge. I cut out a section of the railway, and there's a high bridge down in Ferrisburg, Vermont, that I wanted to model and put in there, and it looked like a good place for it. So someday when I get some more chance, I'll do that. What I wanted on that high section was I wanted to run. Behind us directly is just a nice long place for trains to go, and it's a nice slow easy grade, and it was just exactly what I wanted, but it took up the rest of the cellar.
What's the size of your layout, Nick?
I think the cellar is 20 by 30. So that's pretty much what it is. This is a staging yard that was behind that loop. That loop you're seeing is right behind those tank cars. Burlington Electric were brought up from gray styrene. Actually, I brought up quite a few cars from gray styrene. That's it.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Great.
So what's the connection between the top and bottom level?
You know what? I didn't show that part of it. It's off to my left, and it's just a really nice, slow, easy, long grade that goes from one end of the house to the other. And it's the layout is really a mixture of an awful lot of stuff. It's I took I think it was half inch plywood and cut it into 3.5 inch strips, and made a box, and then reinforced it in the middle. And so if we ever had to take it up, I'd have to cut the track, but it could probably come up in semi-permanent modules. Over in the Burlington yard, that's all homosewed underneath that. I was experimenting with that. And on a lot of it's just cork on plywood. And when we started up the hill, there's cork on spline. And I don't have that piece of spline here handy. But it was three pieces of masonite with blocks left over from the 1/2 inch plywood and 3/8 inch plywood that I've been using. The spline went all the way around, and actually you could see spline when it went around that back section. I wouldn't dare sit on that. I wouldn't dare stand on it, but boy, that's just rock solid. I would recommend that very highly for anybody who wanted to do that. And I enjoyed it a lot because it allowed me to curve the railroad, make bends, And it's very natural, very easily formed. I'd take one section of it, curve it to about what I wanted, and then put a second section, and then clamp the two pieces of spline together on the piece of plywood. And that way I could go up through and I could stagger the plywood, not the plywood, but the masonite. And then I went around with a third one. And if you leave a channel in there, you've got a line, you've got a space for your power bus and also your signal bus. And if I ever built a railroad again, it would all be that spline way. It seems pretty quiet. It's just it flows like flex track. It isn't I don't know, when I'm on just straight plywood, plywood is flat and it just it's more like snap track. You're kind of locked into the contour, which is essentially no contour. Whereas with the spline, I just kind of liked it because it flowed. It was a nice medium to work with.
What'd you put on top of your spline?
Just another piece of masonite.
And then cork on top of that?
Cork on top of that, and then rail, and then flex track on top of that.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Worked out quite well. Yep.
What's your next project going to be? You bring anything out other than your buddies?
I got one more. Actually, I got two more buddies to go. TC was twisting my wrist in terms of talking about decoder buddies into S scale, and then in the conversation it came up that N scale would be nice to consider. He and I had a discussion, and then I just last night had another discussion with the guy I do electronics with, and we both kind of have an idea. I don't really want to go head to head with that guy on the West Coast, but he's kind of said also that he's going to stick with just the Cato versions of his N scale decoder holder for the next 18. I'm considering that, and I'd like to put an X18 connector onto the Decoder Buddy Mini, the small Decoder Buddy. I'll show you that in a minute or two, what that looks like. Essentially, it doesn't have the small connector board, and it's shorter so that it would fit into one of the earlier EMD switchers a lot easier because it doesn't have the length. There's a little more room to put a stay alive or keep alive or whatever you want to call them in there. It's to be perfectly honest with you, some days, a lot of days, I like to exercise. I like to get out and walk. I had a stent a couple years ago that essentially didn't take me out of aviation, but it certainly put a wrinkle in the fabric of my aviation career. And so, that takes up time and just, doing stuff, being retired. I don't know how I had enough time to work and do stuff and keep a rhythm. But I every once in a while I'll come around and say, hey, listen, it'd be kind of neat to go after a little bit of scenery again. Or maybe even to install a Decoder Buddy, or put some lights in a locomotive. This one here, I started this last year. You saw the bottoms of it, and that's as far as that one's gotten. I've got, I'd like to finish this one off. I'd like to get some ground and step light, a few more ground and step lights to show people. And I've done one and they go in pretty easily. So I'm psyched to do a few more of those. It just comes out to the amount of time I have in a day.
The average modeler, Nick, that's never done one of these before, how hard is this?
You know, if you haven't started on one, I'd say get yourself an old electronics thing, an old transistor radio, or you know, we had a microwave oven that died, and you know, if you take it to the dump for recycling, they'll charge you $15. But if you take it in small pieces, you don't get charged as much. And if you save the printed circuit board out of that, you got a whole bunch of components on it. And you can start learning how to solder and unsolder and solder and put things back and forth together. So I think if you get yourself a good soldering iron, like a little Weller, had one of those around a couple minutes ago, and just get an idea what solder does, that would be a good place to start. And you know, from the video that I just showed you, there's only six or eight wires that you're basically going to put on the bottom, and a couple wires on the top to lights. And it does, for me, it just didn't turn out to be very hard at all. It just I've been electronics hack for forever, though. Like I said, I started with that TAT 3 or TAT 4 throttle from Model Railroader, and boy, that was when I was 15 years old. That's probably 1960, 1960, I wish. Yeah, 1963, 1964, 65, in that area. But
what kind of solder do you use?
if you promise not to tell the Europeans that I'm selling the decoder buddies too, it's lead and solder. 60-40. Yeah, 60-40. And don't be afraid of flux. I'll tell you a little story. My father worked in the electronics industry in the middle of his career. He was an experimental engineer, and he built the machines that made the capacitors that went to the moon and came back, and his company got commendations for doing that. So actually, I was lucky. I bumped into some engineers back when I was back in the 60s, and they showed me how to solder. And when I was building the TAT throttle, I got capacitors and resistors and a lot of the parts from those guys, so I didn't have to buy them. And he left a legacy of a bottle of flux, Kester 414, I think it was, and a whole bunch of Kester 44 solder. And I was putting that on one of my locomotives, one of those yellow aces that you saw, or one like it. You didn't, they were on the back bench, and everything was fine. You know, it looked good, and I turned it on, and some of the lights came on that were supposed to, and other lights came on that weren't supposed to. And I turning everything on and off and trying to figure out what was possibly wrong with this. And I was using a Loc Sound, one of the Select Directs. So it was pre 21 pin decoder days. So I had pads to solder on, and I just couldn't figure it out and couldn't figure it out and couldn't figure it out. And finally I took a toothpick and went around each of the solder joints, just to see if I had a bridge in there or whatnot. And I didn't, but I cranked it up again and it worked fine. what I found out was that it was acid flux. And that did me in totally. I never, I came out of school as a chemist, and I know that I know that acids will carry electrons just right on their back, right across that bridge. And but I never suspected that. So in the new age of electronics, in the age that he was working in, that much current, getting across whatever they were doing didn't make any difference. But in the new age of electronics, when you're dealing with milliamps and microamps, it was enough to light up some LEDs on me. So I had to clean all those off and redo them. And so a good solder, there's a lot of good solder available now for electronics, but my recommendation is Chip Quick for flux. And don't be afraid to use it, and don't be afraid to use alcohol to clean it off with afterwards. But the flux that you get these days won't bridge and light your LED, light the wrong LEDs for you.
When you say don't be scared of flux, what do you mean?
Use as much as you want. It'll clean off with alcohol and a Q-tip very easily.
You put the solder on the tip of your iron first and touch it, or how do you get the solder to the joint?
Thank you. I like reflow for all this. If you're taking solder and taking your iron and putting solder on a very small point, and you've got a nice big round piece of solder going in there, chances are you'll get way too much solder on there. And you don't need very much solder to make a good joint. So with two hands, I've got solder in this hand, I've got flux on the part, and I've got my soldering iron here, just a little bit of solder on the part and a little bit of solder on the wire, and then put the wire on the part exactly where I want it, and then just reflow that, warm it up again, get it into a liquid state, and then back out again. And I find there's a lot better control in the amount of solder and the quality of the joint if I do it that way. That's called the reflow method. Who does an awful good job on YouTube is Larry Linger. He and I have been working, very close together. And if you go into YouTube and search solo contracting, he's excellent. He's really good. I know how to solder. I know how to do all this stuff. I know how to do it, and I'll still go in on a Sunday morning and watch him put a locomotive together. He's just good and smooth, and he's just, if you want a mentor, he's right there for you.
Gotcha.
What was the name of that contracting again?
Solo contracting.
Solo?
Yep. SOLO.
Okay.
Yep. And then contracting.
Nick, let me ask you a question. Would you mind coming back sometime and maybe demonstrating that soldering techniques for everybody?
Sure.
I'm not sure many people understand what you're really talking about.
Boy, I don't know whether I've got that on here, but I've where is that? I'll have to. Yeah, actually, I've got a video of it under the microscope where I do that. But yeah, I can do that. That's no problem.
Okay. Well, let's try to do that when you get a chance. Maybe we can talk later and you come back and show us that technique, because You know, that has so many applications to the hobby. It's not just this one application that you can do that with. And
Sure. Yeah. Well, you know, if you have the other place that'd be very handy is if you had if you'd soldered some track together, and track is fairly stable, and you can use a big chunk of fairly, you know, not a big chunk of solder, but you know, you're using a fair amount of solder that way. But if you wanted to say right at that joint, drop a feeder, then what you do is you tin your wire and just put it up against that joint and just barely melt it on, and you'd have a feeder wire right there pretty quickly too. I've done that quite a little bit. That reflow method is very, very handy.
doesn't take very long to heat it up either.
Nope. Nope.
Well, I'll be glad. I really appreciate if you come back and show us that video, because I think that'd be interesting to a lot of people.
Sure. That'd be about a 2-second video. No problem. Yeah.
Interesting aside, you've got a lot of 60/40, perfectly fine solder. Have you ever heard of 6337?
Yeah, Eutectic?
Yeah, it melts so much easier for me than does the 60/40.
You know, TC, I've heard that, and I've heard that it's either solid or liquid. There's no.
Yeah, it really doesn't have a puddle stage.
Yeah, but you know, I've just to tell you the truth, I'm still burning through my dad's solder that he left.
And you'll be burning through it for the rest of your life until your grandkids.
Yeah, you need any? I can even give
No,
you.
I've got tons of both. And I've got some 3070 and some 2080.
Wow. Interesting.
The 2080 is silver.
Mhm.
Silver and
Actually, I used silver solder when I redid my my Shinohara switches.
yeah, you need lots of amps to melt that 2080.
Yeah,
It's like 800 and something degrees.
yeah,
It is tough stuff. Of course, once this connection is made, it never comes apart,
yeah, yeah. Very sturdy.
but very hard to do.
You ever tried 50/50?
I never have. I've heard of it, but I've never used it.
It's great. It's called body putty.
Oh yeah, that stuff. Okay, then I have used it. I just didn't know it was solder.
Yeah,
I never called it solder.
it's 50/50 solder, and I use it all the time to fill gaps and so forth in models that I build in brass.
I'll bet. Nice.
It
Yeah.
would work well for that.
Oh, it flows so nice and easy. It's scary sometimes. It'll just flow right through that joint.
Yeah.
So you do resistance soldering then?
I do resistance, but I prefer to do just regular soldering.
Now, do you use a torch or a large iron on that 50/50?
I've got I think it's a Weller variable speed unit, and I put it up to about medium speed on that, and I'll use that probably 90% of the time on most of the soldering I do.
Mhm.
I like the resistance. It's easier in a lot of instances, particularly if you're in tight places. I think it's much easier for me, at least.
A lot of people use it, and I've never done this, but one of the brass builders talked about using a resistance soldering iron and lots of different solders with different melting points, including low temp stuff for the final putting on the really tiny details.
I was building a stock car out of brass, scratch building it, and I was having trouble getting the side strips to stay where I wanted them and so forth. And the resistance soldering iron was just, I mean, it was nothing once I started using that, because I could just touch the points where I wanted them, and that was it, and go on to the
Yeah,
next
you
point.
can heat
That
up the
was it.
whole item.
Yeah,
I think it was Claude Wade. Don't quote me on that. Maybe Paul remembers, that wrote about building a resistance soldering iron using a variac. And it probably would be illegal according to OSHA. There was no safety features whatsoever. This was back in the 40s.
I got mine back in about 91. We used to live outside of Detroit, and there was a company in Detroit called American Beauty.
Yes, they're still around.
I know, and I have one of everything they've got, and God, I can't tell you how long it's been. It still works today. I use it all the time.
Yeah, the SN3 importer PBL sells their stuff. I believe they rebrand it, but it's American Beauty if I remember everything correctly.
Micromart sells it too.
Yeah. I think there's only 2 resistance soldering iron manufacturers left in the U.S.
It's rather
American-
pricey. It's rather pricey.
It's not something you buy out of pocket change. No.
Yeah.
No, but I tell you, if you're really into soldering and working in brass or metals, it for a lot of applications, I think it's the way to go. And at the same time, I can say that I can probably do 95% of what I like to do in building in brass with just my normal soldering iron, but it's a variable speed one. I can change the temperature.
Yeah. I knew a guy, long dead, who built out of brass with a torch.
Ooh,
He had a little pin torch, not like a plumbing torch, but a really tiny torch, and he could vary the temperature on that thing and, you know, hold his hand above it and tell you how many degrees it was, and he was never more than 3 degrees off.
I use one of those. I use one of those too. It just depends, you know. If the thicker the brass, the more heat you got to have. I find, at least. So it just depends on what I'm trying to solder and how thick the brass is or the metal that I'm trying to get together.
You ever done modeling with nickel brass?
No.
We
No.
often call it nickel silver, but
No, don't use it. Don't use it at all. It's kind of like Nick was saying. It's not that I have so much of it, but I have certain suppliers that I've gone to for no telling how many years. Certain, you know, when the brass, I use K&S products. So when I ordered, I know exactly what I'm getting, exactly the thickness, exactly what I'm going to be building with it, and the same kind of stuff for my solder.
yeah. Well, that's like the guys who build in styrene. Some of them, it's styrene if it comes from the grocery store signs. And other guys are like, no, I won't use anything but evergreen or anything but plastic. They're
Yeah.
very particular about the plastic they use.
Well, it's consistency. At least that for me, it's consistency. I know exactly how it's going to operate. I know exactly how that flow is going to be of that solder before I even touch it, and it's just easy.
Well, you're used to the materials. It does exactly what you want. It's like some guys won't touch brass or plastic. They're still building in wood because it acts exactly like what they expect.
And Nick, you've got to be the same way. I mean, that's why you use a certain solder. That's why you have the iron that you use, and that's why you do certain things a certain way.
Actually, I'd like to show you guys.
Yeah.
That's the soldering iron that I used for years and years and years. And I had to escalate. The other thing that I discovered lately is this. I don't know whether it'll focus on that or not, but that's brass wool, and it's how I clean my tips now, and it just my tips. I can keep a tip around for a long time now. If I go back and I kind of have 3 levels. What I'll do is I'll use the brass, and if it gets really bad, and it just hasn't gotten bad lately, I'll go back and use some water, and that brass wool is that means I'm not tipping the glass over on my bench anymore. And it's worked really well. Another trick that I learned was when I finish soldering, what I'll do is just on the end of that tip, I'll take and just make it wet all the way across with solder, and wait for the I use solder with flux in it. Wait for the smoke to go away, and then let it set for a couple more minutes, and then turn the soldering iron off. And when I come back, what I'll do is I'll shake that solder off, because it's usually a pretty good sized drop, and then that tip is just it's all ready to go again. And that was a really nice trick. Let me show you what I got for my for the little LEDs though. Those little 201s. This is what I use for those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You're
right.
pulling our leg.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, well, Nick, isn't that kind of the same idea of banking the fire for the night?
I'm sorry?
That's kind of the same idea of banking a fire. You overtend the tip so it doesn't corrode,
Exactly right.
and then when you shake all that off, it's tinned and ready to go.
Yep. And boy, the difference between the tip life that way and just, I used to think that you cleaned it off and with water on the sponge and clean it off and clean it off and clean it off, and then put it in the holder and turn it off and walk away. And,
Oh, it oxidizes like crazy.
oh yeah, just it wasn't getting very good life on the tips.
Well, I always used that stuff they call tip cleaner.
Yep,
It's in a little tin,
little tin, yeah.
but it doesn't seem to make much difference.
I agree.
I'll have to try your method. See if it makes a difference, because my tip is just shot in no time.
Yep. I
I
think
have found even if I go and buy a brand new tip and don't use it for a while, because I'm, stocking up or something,
yep.
it corrodes in the meantime.
I don't know what you guys are doing different than I am. I've used this same tip now for 2 years. And I use it, I do my soldering, I turn off the unit and I walk away. I come back, heat it up, run it across my sponge and go solder some more. I've been doing that with the same damn thing for 2 years.
Wow.
Well, you're not hyper cleaning it at the end of your cycle. And
What
you're
I'm
not-
telling you is what I'm doing.
Yeah, when you say turn it off and walk away, you're leaving whatever solder was on there is still
Yeah.
staying on there, protecting the tip.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I'm just leaving whatever's there until I come back and turn it back on. It'll start flowing again and I'm off and going.
I've always been taught to clean the tip.
I was too. And then somebody said, well,
Don't-
why are you doing that? Why are you losing all that great solder? And I said, what on earth do you mean? He said, just walk away and see what happens.
Mhm.
That was probably very good advice.
I don't know, but that's the kind of thing that I learned from my mentor. As I know when I started, I didn't even know what a ball peen hammer was.
Oh man, that's like I've got one that's well, it's not as thick as my finger, my little pinky. It's a tiny little hammer, but you want to take out, do the roll. You don't hit it, you roll it. You hit glancing blows. You can take out anything, make it smooth as the glass again. But and a piece of glass on the other side is a really good trick too. But I had a guy at the Columbia Gorge Railroad Club that showed me that. You get the tiniest ball peen hammer you can buy and just hit glancing blows, and it'll spread the brass or the plastic, and it'll be nice and smooth again.
How about that?
Interesting.
But if you hit it, you'll put a dent the other way. Yeah, you won't fix your dent and you'll have a little bump in it. It's like, dang.
That's how I make my brass passenger car roofs, with a ball peen hammer. And I have a wooden rounded scooped out little bowl.
You have
And
a form, yeah.
And I'll take my brass end of it and put it in that bowl and hit it with a ball peen hammer until it gets to the right shape.
That's how they made noses for F units. They had a big, huge form they'd made out of many layers of plywood. And they took that steel and probably a lot bigger hammer and formed that nose. That's the reason that to this day, we argue, what does a nose supposed to look like? Well, since every single half was different than every other half, does it really matter? Because they didn't build them the same.
Well, does anybody else have any good questions for Nick and his great product? Nick, I can't thank you enough for coming tonight. And I do hope you'll come back and give us a great demonstration of your soldering technique you discussed, because I think a lot of people could use that and benefit from it. The other thing, I got one last question for you. How do you know which is the positive side to an LED?
If they come with wires on them, the red side. If you have the type that looks like the top or the round top, then the longer lead is positive. If you have an SMD LED without wires on it, the positive side is they have an arrow, and the positive side is the thick part of the arrow side. When you got it all behind the place where you can see it, then you take that same old 3-volt battery and you try it this way. If it works, it's right. If it doesn't, change it and it'll work the other way. Trial and error is it will work. If you've got, you can't break an LED, Jim. You just if you've got the right voltage, if it doesn't work one way, try it the other, and it should.
Which side of the LED do you put the resistor on?
Either side.
Doesn't make any difference?
Doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference.
Okay.
The LEDs are diodes, so if you know what the markings are for a diode, like you say, the longer leg or the stripe, some LEDs, they'll have the little bitty plastic part that's the actual light emitting, and then the ceramic ends where the connectors are on the underside. One of them will be darker than the other one. That's your stripe.
Yep.
Capacitor, the little surface mount capacitors are the same way. And I can be corrected on this because I don't know, but I think the stripe is actually on the negative on a capacitor, but I could be wrong. Yeah, it's opposite LED, it's opposite diodes, I think.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I think it is.
I just don't get into capacitors.
Well, and some of the capacitors they make now, if I had the decoder in here again, I could show you this little orange dot. You cannot hardly see it with the naked eye.
Mm-hmm.
And one end is brown. That's a capacitor. It's about as long as my fingernail is thick.
Yep.
And I'm like, how do they solder that? Well, they solder it with an oven. They don't use soldering iron, but still,
yeah,
that's tiny.
TC, the reason I ask these questions, I may be the only person here tonight that really didn't know the answer to them before I asked it. But when Nick said, well, you know, you put this wire to the positive side and so forth, I'm thinking, what in the hell is he talking about? How on earth do I figure out which is the positive side on an LED?
Yeah, it's not as easy as people might think it is. But no, the resistor is just a power limit, so it doesn't matter which side it's on. A lot of people say it ought to be on the positive side so you don't overfeed the LED, but I think that's an old electrician's tale. I don't think it really matters.
So anyway, Nick, I can't thank you enough for coming tonight. I really do appreciate it. I think you've helped us all learn a tremendous amount about your product, but also about the wiring and so forth connected with DCC. And I really do appreciate the time that you took tonight to be with us.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's been my pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to being back.
That's great. Well, listen, I've got a couple of more things and then we'll close it out. I've been asked to be the ambassador for the Professional Association of Model Builders with the model railroad community. And we've had a couple of their members in their association on our shows. Aaron with Avis Designs, who has the putty product and so forth, you may remember.
Mhm.
And we also had Acropolis Studios, and that was with Jill, and she talked to us about her 3D printing and so forth and what her company did. And both of those companies, as well as others, are members of this association. But then you've got large corporations all over the world that are also members of this association. And what it amounts to is these are the model builders that are in it for their career. This is their job. This is the thing they went to school to learn. These are the techniques that they either picked up in high school or picked up in a college, wherever they actually learn the design skills and the model building capabilities to actually work for these corporations and produce whatever models the corporation asked them to produce. So these are real professionals in what I consider to be our hobby. That is model building. And I love model building. That's what my articles are all about. That's what these shows are trying to be about. So I'm really happy that they want to appeal and get more of us in the hobby interested and talking to members of their association. And I think that's great. I think it's great for their association. And I also think it's great for us. So we're going to probably have some more of their members as guests on our show. And I'll be talking about it from time to time, about what I'm finding out as I find out more about the people in the association and about really how they can really interact with us in the hobby of model railroading, and we can all benefit, both not only as a modeler, but also as a manufacturer. Because I think the hobby manufacturers can pick up some great information, and maybe down the road there'll be a way of cooperating somehow between these companies and the model manufacturers that are doing the creativity part of building the products that we are buying, and they're bringing them to the market for us. So I think it could be a win-win for both organizations, both for our hobby as well as their association. It's the Association of Professional Model Builders. They have, if you're interested at all, if you'll go to their website, they're offering a free membership to us. This doesn't give you all the benefits of being a member of the association. If you want the benefits of the association, then that's going to cost you $30 a year for retired membership that they just started giving. Because when I first found out about them and started talking to them, they talked about, well, when are you going to join? And I said, I can't afford you. I'm sorry, you're just too pricey for me. I'm not a corporation. So they said, well, fine, we'll see if the board will approve it. And so they've approved some lower cost memberships for frankly, people like us and for people in our hobby. So I really appreciate them doing that. And I don't see why I think that it would be a good idea for you to consider at least the free membership. You don't, like I say, you don't get all the benefits, but you get the information that the association puts out. And you can see what they're doing and how they're doing it. One of the things they're doing is they're having their 3-day annual convention for the first time next year over Zoom. And Dylan, we've been talking about a multi-day train show. And I had found some information about how they're planning to operate their 3-day convention. And I think we may be able to use some of that same kind of information for our 2-day train show in January. So I'm hoping that there'll be a lot of great information flowing both ways. And I hope you'll at least consider maybe the free membership, where you'll start getting some information and see what they're all about on our behalf. So with that said, I thank you so much for coming. I hope you've learned something tonight. And I hope you'll remember to come to our November the 21st train show. And thank you so much again. I appreciate it so much.